I basically am a product of a failed breeding experiment. Basically, Scooby-Doo taught me how to speak English. In a matches box, I used to carry gunpowder. I used to make devices and contraptions with dubious intent. Soviet biological experiments to create the most horrible monsters. Torture, biological experiments, chemical warfare. That is the method of raising a child in Eastern Europe. Scream like baby is born, yell, dump generational trauma, yell some more, and then yell some more when they're an adult. Hello friends, how are you doing? I'm doing swell, trying to do swell, and today I want to thank you all for 20k subscribers. I was planning to do it much earlier, with a different environment, but life is never what you plan for, and I decided to do this video the exact same place where I did the previous video last year about exactly the same time. I celebrated 5,000 subscribers, so in 1 year we went from 5,000 to 20,000, so hopefully next year we will get to 100,000. Well, a man can dream. And I'm truly grateful to all of you, my viewers, who deemed me worthy enough for your subscription and to have watched my videos. Again, some videos get more views than others, and I'm trying to figure out the cruel mistress that is the algorithm. I'm very grateful that all of you subscribe to my channel. And I grew up on YouTube, watching YouTube since I was, 10 years old, when YouTube was still in its infancy. And since then I really admired a lot of YouTubers, and about 10 years ago and a little bit more, I tried many times to start a YouTube channel, but I finally managed to do it about 3 to 4 years ago. I dedicated my time, my efforts, and created this channel that have been trying to start for more than a decade. I'm very grateful for you, my dear viewers, who helped me and are helping me to achieve my dreams, because I have more and more greater and greater things planned. But the world and the environment is becoming more and more chaotic, and unfortunately my own problems and internal and external problems are really in the way to fully spread my wings of creativity, and I'm really sorry for that, because I really want to create more and more content that you will enjoy and bring joy, happiness, and hopefully a little bit of enlightenment, if I dare say, with my videos. And I really enjoyed in other YouTubers where they talk about their lives, their journeys, how they got there, to learn more about the creator that I follow. And if you would indulge me, I'll tell you a journey, the legend, lore, the origin story of how I came to be and how I got here. In previous video where I celebrated my 5,000 subscribers, I talked about my family, because recently, when I made that video, and about a year ago, my grandmother passed away, and 2 years before then my grandfather passed away. Both of them were really influential in my life, and they brought a lot of joy, happiness, and a lot of pride in my family, because they did a lot of great things, a lot of historically monumental things, and I sort of dream to continue my family's tradition, my family's work in the arts, with my own unique twist and unique form. And previously I talked about my family's journey, how it goes for centuries and centuries, how my great-grandfather was one of the first theater directors and in the country, and how my grandfather was a famous actor, and my grandmother was a famous actress and model, and many other family members. And now I would like to introduce my story, and through my story also talk about my family as well, because one of the biggest things in my life is that again, I come from a really honored and prestigious family, but unfortunately I was born in Soviet Union, so in more capitalistic, filthy capitalistic societies, my family would be very wealthy and have a lot of privileges. But unfortunately, because it was Soviet Union, and especially after Soviet Union's collapse, my family struggled as much as any other, maybe less, maybe more in some regards. And I usually think a lot about this idea of nepotism. What does it mean, and how does it differ for continuing your family tradition, and where does nepotism come in? Where does your family's influence override your own creative work? And that is a really complicated topic that I've been wrestling, because at some points in my life I really didn't want to tell people that I come from family of actors and artists, because I didn't want their opinion of me to be judged by the family. But then I don't know. My grandfather told me that one of the only things that he's leaving me is the legacy. So it is disrespectful for him so that I would not use his legacy, and he could not help me beyond the grave with his work that he did, because it didn't really give a lot of monetary, some monetary, because artist life is difficult in itself, and artist life where honoraries are really little, because Soviet Union doesn't like to pay a lot of money to people. Usually you get money by stealing and becoming a bureaucrat that does a lot of shady work. All right, I've been rambling about that part for many long while, and I would like to introduce my life story and give my perspective. I really don't want to overshare or tell too much. That kind of breaks the illusion that viewer and creator has. But I really enjoy where my favorite creators on YouTube tell about their struggles, their journeys, and see where I can relate and see where their life differs from mine. So if you're interested in the crazy adventure that I lived in, I could paint you a picture for it. I'm not going to go too much details. I'll say this, and probably the length of the video is really long, but I would like to share the lore, the backstory that brought us here. Journey in life, of course, as every person's, begins with their parents. I'm not going to go too much in detail with my parents, but I would say that I basically am a product of a failed breeding experiment to create the most crazy person possible with crazy artistic capabilities that grants me the ability to be creative in many fields, but unfortunately really scatterbrained and incapable of being a due diligent worker. I'm your typical child prodigy who is a burnout, a failure, who is struggling to fulfill parents' expectations that parents placed on them before they weren't even born, and all that jazz. Both sides of my families were creatives in their fields, directors, actors, worked in theater, in commercial work, in a lot of prestigious careers. But then Soviet Union fell apart, and the 90s happened. The dark 90s. For Westerners, the 90s is a nostalgic memory where fun things happened, but for Eastern Europeans, 90s was basically post-apocalyptic world where previous totalitarian, tyrannical, dystopian government collapsed, but in its ruins, a disastrous system arrived where either you sacrifice everything and either you gained a lot and became really rich and really wealthy, or you went into complete destitute that even decades later you cannot come out of. Unfortunately, the luck of the draw went that my family risked it all and unfortunately got with nilch and less than nilch, a lot of trouble, a lot of unfortunate series of events that I'm not going to divulge here, but it would be really familiar to a lot of my Eastern European viewers who have a lot of generational trauma dumped on them when they were really young. All the troubles the family and the ancestors went through and trickled down to your generation to explain why your family cannot afford your little toy that you really want. That part of the lore is not for me to divulge, but it's a typical story. Risks were taken, those risks didn't pay out, and in the wake of it, I was born. I was actually born in Russia, the dark lands, the realm of Gog Magog, the demon realm. I'm joking. Slightly. I always think about this, that there is an alternative reality where my family stayed there and I was a Russified Georgian living in Moscow. Just to think who and what could have been if the timeline didn't go as it went in this reality. But also, my family did win green card to go to America, but my family fell apart before they could actually use that opportunity. So there is three possible realities. My reality that I came back to Georgia and lived the life here, a reality where I stayed in Moscow and became someone else, and a reality where I, with my family, went into America and probably was born there, gained citizenship, and had a completely different life. I always dream what their lives might be, and I imagine what could have been. One of the most important thoughts I have is which one of us would be the fattest? Am I the fattest and am I the girthiest, or my American counterpart would be the girthiest? So in this timeline, again, risks were taken, those risks didn't pan out, and we returned to Georgia. Georgia in the 90s and early 2000s was going through a lot. It was basically after the ruins of Soviet Union were slowly settling, the fires were slowly coming down, and while I grew up, Georgia also grew up out of this previous regime and was born into something new. But unfortunately, now I'll get into the troubles we have now when I get to modern period. But basically, I grew up in typical Eastern European Soviet commie blocks with not a lot of heating, with sometimes electricity, sometimes not. Typical Eastern European poverty. Yet that really didn't bother me when I was a child. I didn't know any other world. I didn't know any other reality could have existed. I appreciated the few fleeting moments where we had light. I appreciated the black and white TV that barely worked. It was a life that I had, but the thing that I didn't appreciate was, of course, the generational trauma, the anxiety my family went through, that the trouble that started from Soviet Union and continued after its collapse. One of the tragedies that I understand and relate to with my parents is that a youth, where they came of age and started working, was when Soviet Union collapsed, and all their work, all their education, all their hard work didn't pan out, and that frustration really simmered, and unfortunately I was subjected to that generational anxiety, because again, for more than 4 to 5 generations of my families were all artists in different fields. The fact that I wanted to continue my family work really bothered my family, because they experienced a lot of hardship doing exactly what I'm trying to do, and they were desperately trying to push me away from this path. But I don't know. They literally bred me for this work. They literally for like 4 to 5 generations of artists intermixing to create me, with different fields, different education. Some of them scientists, some of them generals, some of them different fields, but most of them were dedicated artists. And really is a tragedy for my parents that I also continued that line of work, because they couldn't fulfill their dreams and they really didn't want me to suffer through it. They had a really bad way of expressing that idea, but I got the underlying text beyond the yelling and screaming and fighting. But I still love them and I appreciate them and I understand where they're coming from. But it is hard to fight in nature that you are bred for. Continuing my childhood tragic backstory, the reality was that in my family I grew up with a lot of appreciation of my culture, of my history, of the work my family did, of the work our ancestors did. Great history, great culture, great struggle that my country went through. And I had since childhood instilled a love of my country, love that has been passed down through a lot of struggle, through a lot of strife, through a lot of sacrifice. But then I, of course, went out into the world and saw nothing but ruin, nothing but devastation, nothing but drug-addled maniacs running through the streets, of gangsters, of criminals, of children doing horrible drugs. And basically I was an outsider, outcast in my own society, because I existed in a dream reality that none of my peers did. My peers existed in a real reality, material reality, where suffering, strife, thievery, hooliganism, barbarism was norm, not just norm, it was what to be prideful of. It was honor to be a thief. It was manly to be a degenerate. It was prideful to be a scoundrel. It was people honored monsters, respected criminals, appreciated and venerated thieves and hooligans who brought nothing more than destruction and decay of already collapsing society. And I was born with a lot of ancient, the mountain pride and the wisdom of ancestors and all of this. Basically I was raised with a Middle Ages mentality and brought into a post-apocalyptic 90s hooligan space where I really didn't get along with, and I actively refused to participate in. And it was really difficult because one of the ways you would be familiar with any part of the world who experienced poverty and experienced strife in your country, children, especially those children that are left outside to fend for themselves, like many of us were groomed since childhood to appreciate the criminal world, the underbelly of society, so they later could aspire to be like them and then be used as tools in the wars of gangs and criminals and all the horrible things that not just Eastern Europe, a lot of Western countries experience. I've seen a lot of movies about American gangster life, and it's really similar to the reality that we lived in. But I actively refused, and because I actively refused and not just said, oh, I don't want this, I actively shamed them and called them out. And how can you be a scoundrel? Thievery is wrong. Criminality is typical foolish behavior in that regard. But I still fought for the ideals I believed in, and I got my ass kicked basically daily. But before then, I went to kindergarten, a private kindergarten, where I vividly remember almost everything. When I was 3 years old, I remember going to one kindergarten. Then when I was 4 or 5, went to another kindergarten. It was a private kindergarten where children of similar families went to, and I didn't get to experience a lot of the criminal underbelly and hooligan culture that existed. Just to paint you a picture how different my world was when I was a little kid, especially the school that I went to until 3rd grade was called the night school, the Rhein Debbie, the night, and as in night school, the knights, valiant warriors, and our classes were chess, swimming, judo, martial arts, dancing, and it was a private school, and we had a lot of smart kids who I could share my fascination with Western culture. We used to watch Cartoon Network and other children's cartoons in English. I learned English by watching Scooby-Doo and other crazy cartoons. Basically, Scooby-Doo taught me how to speak English. Through that childhood, I was instilled with a lot of honor, respect, Christian values, if you can call it, historical appreciation of our ancestors, what we did, and also a lot of progressive Western ideas, because my family members were rock and roll and musicians and were really both connected to our ancient history and were very progressive, especially in the mindset of the times. My uncles, both of my uncles are rock musicians, and they had to fight day and night to stand out and be rock and rollers in a time where anything slightly different would get you killed. And I grew up with those ideas, and I would say I've got in a lot of scripts, in a lot of fights, because of my ideas as well. Ideals of old ways, of old traditions, and more modern ideas. I remember I had a fight when I was like 12 or 11 years old, somewhere like that, that I was like saying that rock and roll is cool and rock and roll is not Satan's music, and the kids that were brainwashed by their parents were like, you're a Satanist for listening to rock and roll. And we were in fights, and they used I don't know what is in English. Someone was renovating their house in the neighborhood, and a lot of plywood was there, and they would beat me with that plywood, and I would like grab them and lift them up and throw them. But like 4 against 1, I still consider that I won because I didn't fall down and I threw all of them at the ground. But this is how you defeat an ogre, kids. You surround them, 2 or 3 of them fight him in the front, and one comes and hits something over the head. So this is how you defeat someone larger than you, and those kids were smart enough to use those tactics against me. Few of them would fight me in the front. I would grab one of them, hit the other with, and then other kids would come and hit me over the head with it. That's now I remember it as fun childhood memories, because I always stuck to my principles, and only things I regret is the fights that I didn't fight, and times where I didn't push back, and times where I didn't stand my ground and just decided to like let it go, man. I regretted those moments, but I don't regret any fight I've been in, because I always fought for my principles. And after going into the night school, where I had my like really prideful ideas of what a knight and what a hero should be, fighting for justice, saving damsels and slaying dragons, then that school shut down, and I had to go to the dreaded public schools, especially in the part of the region I am in, where it's the neighborhood schools where a lot of neighborhood kids went to. I had to go to another 3 blocks, not blocks, like 3 micro districts away. I live in high mountains, as you can see. This is basically, I live over those mountains, and every time I went to school and back, I had to literally climb a mountain up and down. Well, there was of course stairs next by, but I chose to climb the mountain. You know, like steep mountains, a lot of danger, and always a chance for me to fall down, and I always took that path because it was more fun and more challenging. Now I'm too fat to climb those hills and mountains, but I always decided to go through the most challenging path to get anywhere. Sometimes I did take the stairs as well, not especially when it was raining and stuff like that, or when I was late to school, and I had to walk kilometers and kilometers just to get to school, where unfortunately that environment, that school really wasn't kind to people like me, people who thought differently, because maybe Soviet Union has ended, but the people, the institutions, especially the school institution, was the same. The teachers were the same, the building was the same, but it was far more ruined, far more filled with broken glass and animal dung everywhere. And the school I went to really made me suffer through, and it took me a lot of time to grow out of it and fix a lot of issues that were implanted there, and many I still struggle to go through, because before then, yes, I had a lot of troubles fighting for my ideals, but I always had friends, I always had my crew and my friend group that thought like me, were raised by decent parents with decent ideas, and I didn't have to constantly face the hooligan culture that existed in more public schools. And going into that environment with those like idealistic perceptions of I am an individual, I have my ideals, both invested in the past of my culture and more progressive ideas coming from the West. Well, I basically had to fight tooth and nail just to exist basically every day. And my biggest bullies were not other students but were teachers who basically enacted the another brick in the wall, the music video in daily motions. And it was really difficult because I managed to go through and let go of a lot of bullying I went through with the other kids, because I was coming from different mentality. I refused to honor their way of thinking. Were constantly insulting the ideals that they thought were true. Of course I didn't think any hooliganism and street culture was respectable, and I expressed those ideas constantly, but to them that was the way of life, that was their way of conduct, and I was an asshole for insulting their ideas. I understand I have my own part to play in aggravate and being constantly annoying and a constant menace. I would say that I was a real menace growing up. I just to mention a few things that I was caught was carrying gunpowder in a matches box. I used to carry gunpowder. I used to make devices and contraptions with dubious intent. Some of them were more biohazardous than the other. I used to make trouble in chemistry lab, creating a lot of concoctions. Was caught spreading and distributing ranged weapons with the kids, making crossbows and slingshots and distributing them to create chaos. So I had my part to play in the whole situation. I wasn't a victim per se. I was aggravated and I thought myself to be in the right at the moment, especially as I thought of myself as a boy genius, evil scientist, evil genius trying to dominate the world and fight all the bullies with my knowledge of science and technology, with my very limited knowledge of science and technology, to be honest. But basically, I modeled my life and personality to Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory, and he was my idol that I aspired to be, but unfortunately, I wasn't as smart to actually create robotics. I tried my best to build giant robots and magic potions, but none of them turned out to be what I planned to be. But that's besides the point. Basically, I was a menace, basically a cartoon character pretending to be a nerdy mad scientist, doing a lot of potions. I used to gather a bunch of grass and material and plants and stuff like that, shake them in a bottle, leave them out in the sun to cook, and then pour the horrible smelling concoction into a spray bottle and use it as a terrorist weapon to threaten all the kids, and they would nickname me the mad professor or something. Basically, I was a horrible menace. Before then, when I was little, I didn't have front teeth. I looked basically, the kid from Stranger Things that doesn't have the upper front teeth. That kid was basically one-to-one me. But imagine that kid not in fun small town America, but in a devastated post-Soviet shithole, basically. When I didn't have that front teeth, I had a nickname, Kid Vampire, vampire kid, blood, Kid Vampire. But then I grew out of it. Front teeth finally came in, but it didn't really fit in my mouth, and unfortunately for 2.5 years later as a teenager I had to wear braces, and that was I was a creepy nerd before, and with braces I was like a walking freak show. Basically, not to stretch this part out, I was your typical sitcom nerd stuck in a really bad part of the world that really didn't appreciate sitcom comedy, where I tried to be like a quirky nerd kid with my scientific ideas and we should build this and we should make this, and I was like, no, you are of the devil, basically to paint a picture. You know, one of those like American movies where like a struggling teacher goes into the projects where a lot of crime and hooliganism and kids are being drafted into the crime drug trade and stuff like that. That's the environment I'm in, but I act like a silly cartoon nerd character, and it's like a total disconnection between who I was and the environment I lived in, which of course you would imagine wasn't really fun for me, and probably wasn't fun for them listening to my crazy nerdy rants. That's basically what I subject you guys to. Back in those days, I really wanted to be a scientist. I had a lot of crazy scientific ideas. Funniest part was I had like a cool scientific idea, and eventually, of course, someone else had that idea and would make that project, and I was like, they stole my idea. But you know, like, it was invented like 50 years ago. A time traveler stole my idea. And as a kid, I had a conspiracy theory. Like some kids have like imaginary friends, and I had an imaginary nemesis, a time traveling scientist who would steal my ideas and then go back in time and make a lot of money by telling it to other people. And then Meet the Johnsons or some cartoon came out with the exact plot. Imagine, I'm thinking like, I must be crazy to think that there is some time traveling evil villain trying to steal my ideas, and literally a movie comes out with exact same plot. Like, that confirmed all my conspiracy theories and all my ideas that I was the one who invented, I don't know, putting wheels on a large bag so it could be easily carried. That was my idea, but time traveling evil mastermind stole it. But okay, rambling too much, trying to get back on the rails. Of course, I was really ostracized by other kids, but later on I appreciated that I didn't try to integrate myself, because there are other kids who were creative, who were passionate, who had their own crazy ideas, but really wanted to have friends and really didn't like that I was their only friends. So they molded their personality to fit into those like hooligan and like street kind of mentality. And unfortunately, those people either died, or when I saw them, their spirit, their passion, their creativity, that what I once adored and appreciated and thought them as my friends, that passion, that spark was gone in their eyes. And I will never regret not sticking to my ideals. Of course, again, being a crazy lunatic myself and doing a lot of insane plots straight out of like a Saturday morning cartoon villains ideas, I still appreciate not trying to bend my personality and abandon my creative side to fit their personality and fit their mold. That there was one mold. I really was jealous for Americans seeing like those movies with like huge schools with like their own lockers where they could leave stuff, and there were like different cliques with different personalities and different interests. I was like, oh, I dreamed of finally going into that space where I could find a little niche of friends that could be it nerds or be it goths or be it, I don't know, theater kids, and having like friend groups that understood me. But unfortunately, I was in, again, the projects with a dramatic movie with starring Keanu Reeves, where he tries to save kids from crime and fails. And that environment, unfortunately, took its toll upon me, because yes, I try to stick to my ideals, but you know, sometimes daily beatings and daily fights really crushes your spirit, especially when I was a teenager and I slowly started developing depression. I fought for my ideas less and less and would stay silent and not fight back, and I regret that part of my life more than anything else. I don't regret being beaten up, I don't regret being in fights. Of course, all the fights were like, two guys would grab my hands from the other side, and one of them would do like, there's a hooligans test, basically. Like, there's a series of questions you have to ask to prove if someone is a hooligan or a street boy or a good boy. That kind of stupid phrases like, are you a thief? Do you live a thief life? No, I don't. But I would make fun of them. I would make fun of, like, well, they would be like, what kind of life you live? I would say, like, I live a chivalric life of a knight, or like, I would make fun of their ideas. Are you a good boy? I would say, I'm a very good boy. Like, no, we mean in the, like, hooligan stance. Are you a good boy? I was like, no, I'm a very good boy. And that would end up in a fight, of course, like an unfair fight. Two of them would grab me, one of them would beat me, and I would consider myself still victorious, because I didn't let them break me mentally. Yes, they would break me physically, but I would stand up and fight again. Some of them I respected because they didn't use the goons to grab me before my interrogations, would actually just physically fight me, because they were the stronger ones and they weren't intimidated by me. And some of them I lost, some of them I won, but I respected those guys more because they at least like 1v1'd me, and they didn't use like tricks like hitting me over the head when I was looking away, or like grabbing one person would fight me from the front, the other would hit me in the back. Like that's bitch moves, you know. But that was daily existence of mine. But the funny thing is, I didn't care about that as much as the bullying I went through by my teachers. Some of them are cool, some of them are neutral, but some of them are, I would say, they should have been locked up in a prison or a mental institution. I perceive them as either demons sent from hell, or like Soviet biological experiments to create the like most horrible monsters. They were truly demonic people. I cannot express how evil these teachers were. I really don't want to rehash a lot of painful memories, but they would use torture, biological experiments, chemical warfare, acts banned by Geneva Convention, horrible experiments, horrible torments and physical afflictions, mental torment, psychological and emotional distress, all the horrible things that you can think of. They would use constantly to terrorize the children. Of course, children are very rowdy and they needed to be put in line, but other teachers managed to put the kids in line without any violence and without any torture. But some of them genuinely used horrible torture tactics. I don't even want to go into, like, if I start talking about the horrible child abuse each teacher and like violent criminal offenses those creatures, not teachers, did, I would I don't know, maybe even break down just the traumatic memory that I went through. And unfortunately, those teachers were teachers of science, mathematics, chemistry, less chemistry, but physics and mathematics were the worst ones. And those were the subjects that I was passionate as a kid, because as a child, I wanted to be a scientist. My other grandfather was a oceanologist, a scientist, and I wanted to become a scientist and follow his path, but be an inventor, like a mad scientist from cartoons. That's what I really wanted to be. So I knew a lot about physics, I knew a lot about chemistry, biology, before those classes even started. And the fact that I knew aggravated them, and they punished me for it. You can like imagine a teacher punishing a student for being interested in their subject and knowing about their subject. And I'm not just talking about yelling and screaming. I'm talking about being beaten, hit. One teacher literally pulled me off from sitting so hard they ripped my ear, and they used to, like, when you didn't pay attention, they would just thwack you on the table with your head. Like if you're like this, they would like take your hand out and thwack you with, and many other like hitting you. Like our math teacher would like grab the little chalk balls that couldn't be used to draw anymore, and she would hit you, and if she missed you, she would make you take the chalk and bring it closer and hit you over the head when you're closer. Not for doing anything wrong, just to call you to come to the desk to do the math equation. And this is like the jokey fun stories I can tell. She did like, she also like stank like not just someone being smelly, like we would gag till like some of us even vomited. It was so horrible. Like we would literally riot and not go into her class because it stank so much. I used my coat and would hang the arm out from the window and use it to breathe, or like would sneak when she was not looking, breathe out from the table and hold my breath. And I really was like, I could hold my breath for like 2 to 3 minutes by training myself. It was so horrible. I don't really want to go deep into those memories because it was really painful. The abuse was so horrible that people like other classmates who would bully me would genuinely stand up for me with other like more decent teachers, be like we hate this kid. But even the horrible things he's subjected to, we are horrified by. Like that's the level of torment. Like that's the Soviet method, I believe. Like to crush any creativity, any free spirit, any free knowledge. I unfortunately met more teachers like that, even in university, where 90% of the teachers were progressively minded, but 1 or 2 were Soviet rejects that still were alive and clinging to their seats in the university. And those like, you must not think outside of the box. You must follow everything that is written. You must not have original ideas. Because I was into science and into new ideas, I knew some things that were like science changes, some new ideas comes along. I would share those ideas, and I was like horribly abused just for questioning the teacher. You know, the other kids who like never did their homework, never did nothing, they just got slight abuse and slight beatings like on regular basis. But I was specifically targeted for it, and it crushed my scientific spirit. And I once where I wanted to become a scientist, be it in physics, be it in other like chemistry and biology. Like I went through biological path only because the biology teacher was sick most of the time, and she didn't have time to beat us as much. So I don't have as much traumatic memories about biology classes as I have the other ones. And that also like teachers would gruel us, like punish us for any even having a stutter. I developed a stutter, a fear of presenting. Before I was raised on a stage, I was constantly on a stage. I basically grew up on a stage because my family were artists, actors, like directors, and I experienced that firsthand. Like I was never frightful going on stage, but that period of time of being like questioned, grilled, insulted, not just by other students who were like looking for any weakness to like jump and insult, but mostly by the teacher. All the horrible things I went through with the other kids, I'm like, okay, they were kids, I was kids, we were all fucking around. I don't really hold any grudges towards them, but the teachers, I cannot overcome that part. Like that was so horrible. And that changed my trajectory to reject all like even seeing few numbers triggers me, and I have like Vietnam style flashbacks back to school. It really brings me pain just remembering how horrible each day was, not just like sometimes. Each day was so horrible. Life wasn't really that fun outside of school. I was raised by the mentality of this is what is meant to be. This is what everyone does, so we must do it like this. So we must go through the exact same things. You must go through the rule book of being raised. And one of the things is like, I am struggling with school because my teacher is beating me. Oh, then we must give you a tutor. No, I'm telling you, my teacher is daily abusing me, torturing me, subjecting me to horrible torture. Well, we could get you 2 tutors. One day I would go to school. then I would go to one tutor, then I would go to another tutor, just because the teachers were abusing me and I were in like the stage of survival, and I couldn't think about, like, I was like trying to save a few hairs on my head for not being pulled. I started going bald when I was 12 years old in like 6th grade, because the teachers would pull my hair so often, because like I would dissociate and go into my imagination and not be present to survive the existence, the horrible existence. They would like just like grab my hair and shake me, or like pull my hair and rip the heads out, and they would be like, oh, more and more hair is in my hand now. And that's one of the reasons I wear my helmet now. Nobody can pull my hair now. This is the real purpose of my helmet, to protect my few pieces of hair I have left in my head. Because of that, my daily regime was going to school, then going to one tutor, then going to another tutor, and coming home like 8 or 9 o'clock, doing like the subjects that I was supposed to do, and then going to sleep. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any like positive interactions outside of the schooling system, and I was subjected to the typical Eastern European parenting style of, if something wrong, yell. If yelling doesn't solve, yell louder. If loud yelling doesn't solve, curse until child shut down. And that's the basically the interact. I have a good relationship with my parents now, but they were like, this is how you parent. You just yell at child. That is how you do it. And I was like, did it work? No, but we tried our best to yell harder and harder. But it didn't work. It's your fault for not working our yelling methods. Not yelling. The call to action, they would call it. Call to action, or call into action. But they were like, oh, but we didn't beat you. That's the line, that like, we emotionally and mentally tormented you, but we didn't beat you. Yes, that's still a benefit, you know. Like you you say thank you what you can get. You appreciate what you can. But this is unfortunately the existence I went through as a teenager, from like 12 years old to 18 years old. It was just school, extracurricular activities, because your teachers didn't teach you anything, so you must go to private tutors, and private tutors were like my only friends in those like from 12 to 18 years old. They were the only people I had positive interactions with, and they were like, we don't actually do anything to the kid. Only thing that we do is just grab his hand, be like, hey, concentrate, because like, of course you don't have ADHD, of course you don't have dyslexia, of course you don't have depression. Those things don't exist. You're healthy, you're just lazy. You know, like telling this story probably really familiar to a lot of Georgians and other Eastern Europeans, I suppose. Yeah. Everything terrible going on, you're like losing grasp of your reality. You're constantly in your imaginary world. Oh, you're just lazy. You're lazy, you're horrible, and we will scream at you until the problem is fixed. That's I don't know, like that's the method that they were told to use. I don't know. I don't think any of their parents actually did that to them, but some of them did, some of them didn't, you know. But that is the method of raising a child in Eastern Europe. Scream like baby is born, yell, dump generational trauma, yell some more, and then yell some more when they're an adult. And hopefully they will become as traumatized as you, and become as much of an alcoholic as you. That's basically the life cycle of an Eastern European. All right. I'm the trauma dumping at this point, not telling you my life story, but going into my sad childhood backstory. And it's actually a funny thing. One of my favorite characters, Doofenshmirtz, Hans Doofenshmirtz, you know. Perry the Plantopus, where did you come from? A Plantopus, Perry the Plantopus, you will not stop my bad plans. I really love that TV show, and I really related to Doofenshmirtz because we basically had the same childhood. You know, like he would stop, Patty, today I decided to build this contraption to mask my horrible trauma that I went through as a child. And would the trauma dump at Perry about his childhood, be like, yeah, it was exaggerated comedy, but kinda I went through a lot of the same things, you know. And one of the funniest, like, childhood traumatic memories so that is connected to Phineas and Ferb is actually really ironic, because I started watching Phineas and Ferb in 2008. There was a Phineas and Ferb marathon, and during that marathon of Phineas and Ferb, Russia invaded Georgia, and I was in a village that wasn't really close, but you know, like planes flew over, we heard bombs falling, and basically me watching Hans Doofenshmirtz about his traumatic childhood, and I was like, yeah, maybe some of us had a rougher childhood. We're literally going through a rougher childhood, and that is one of the traumatic experiences of my generation. Well, a lot of children lost their childhood innocence going through 2008 war, because we quickly had to realize that this is a existential crisis of survival, death and survival. I was even planning to become a child soldier, enlist in the battle, and go to the front and show what for. I was serious in becoming a child soldier. I was literally the 10 to 11 years old at that point, and I was like, I must go into the woods, grab my sword, grab my dagger, and fight for freedom like my ancestors did. You know, as a kid, you're going through something so traumatic, you're trying to find any way of rationalizing and coping with it, and mine was to double down and become a warrior to fight for our country's freedom. But one of the realizations I had to also go through, I had a talk with my family members. I wasn't even with whole of my family, I was with my aunt, and she was like, we might not actually be able to meet your family right now, or maybe ever, and we really need to find right now a way to escape from the country, and you know English, so we would be relying on you, and we would probably need to find a job to survive as a refugee. And I was like, okay. I didn't really cry at that point, or like, I was at the same time not really understanding what's going on, but at the same time fully understanding what was at stake and what I had to do. I've talked to a lot of Georgians my age, and all of them have a similar story of really understanding how the struggle that Georgians go through. You know, a lot of people go through a lot of struggles, but very few go through a lot of through struggles of being bombed and being killed for just existing. But unfortunately, to this day, there are many people going through it, be it Ukrainians, be it Palestinians, or be it many other people who have lived through such horrible experiences. And I sympathize with all of them, because briefly, but thankfully the war didn't last too long, but I still went through that, and I will always have sympathy to anyone, be it from a different religion, different culture, different society. Even those that I might consider enemy, I still might sympathize with them going through such a horrible experience. Again, continuing my trauma dumping session, one of the also traumatic experiences as a child I went through is that I was a child actor. But none of those fancy child actors that get to be diddled by celebrities and then have to write memoirs about it, or have like really crazy parties and have fun backstories to be nostalgic from and have a lot of struggles going through it. But I went through a lot of the same work and struggle of a typical child actor, being overworked, being in tight deadlines, having to have a lot of pressure on a child, but working as a child, doing things that you might not enjoy but you are forced into because your family's decisions, because my family again were all generations and generations of artists and actors and directors. I was subjected to it, but unfortunately after Soviet Union collapsed, the film industry was in shambles and there was no real work, but my family, especially my mother, still did a lot of small budget films and small budget projects where I was the camera operator, the actor, the director, everything other than someone who gets some peace and quiet. And I really struggled through that part of my life. My mother thinks that she gave me a crash course in life and gave me a lot to appreciate and gave me a lot of experience, but actually to start my channel I really had to overcome a lot of traumas and a lot of negative experiences I went through in this field. Let's not go into deep detail, but listening to other Western American child actors talking about their the traumatic experiences, I'm like, is it that bad to be your feet be tickled by Dan Schneider? Maybe not like a full blown, of course that's horrible, full blown, but I still got a lot of unwanted touches and kisses and hugs from strange uncles and aunts just being a child. So maybe getting paid for it wouldn't be as bad. Okay, that's a little bit of a fucked up thing to say, but there are many different ways to have a fucked up childhood. Unfortunately, I really wanted to start my own channel, but those traumatic experiences were really dampening, and even to this day I have to struggle through a lot of mental blocks and barriers that were created at that point. And when I was a teenager I did try to make my own short films, even went through something I really appreciate going through is Pioneer Films, Pioneer Castle Youth Center in Rustaveli. I've talked about it before many times. It's a old imperial castle that was converted into a youth center for kids during Soviet Union for pioneers, and that institution continued. My grandmother used to teach there, and I basically spent most of my childhood running around in that palace for youth, and there were many different centers, many different classes. I used to just jump in and out of, and one of them was Pioneer Films, where children learned how to make short films, how to play on stage, how to direct their own stories. But because of a lot of traumas and a lot of negative experiences, I was really shy and gathered a lot of trauma. And one of the unfortunate things that I regret, because going through that school system and not having a lot of friends, I created a really thick shell around myself with an ironical detachment and being really rude as a kid, that I now looking back really regret, because only type of communication I had with other kids was constantly arguing and constantly insulting one another, and someone would say something and I would find a way to twist those words back to hurt them, and they would try to hurt me and I would try to hurt them, and that's the only way I knew how to communicate. And when I went to this school where the other children went to, I mistook a lot of playful banter as another bullying tactic, and I tried to assert my dominance as well, being more aggressive, more snarky, and really I now regret, because I had a really hard time making friends, and to this day I have hard time making friends because I spent so much time in my childhood and teenagehood being alone and being fearful of others, seeing them as enemies who are against me and who are trying to find my weak points, because many of the bullies that I went through were first my friends who I trusted, and then later used my trust against me, and I created a lot of barriers that I to this day I'm trying to break through and find ways to make friends, which is really difficult to me. One of the worst things that I develop is being used to being alone. That's why I really have hard time reaching out to my friends. If they don't reach out to me, I have really hard time reaching out to my friends. I've talked to a lot of them, but that's the unfortunate traumas that I'm still trying to go through. And I don't know, all of that trauma dumping aside, there are still some bright moments in my childhood. Going into these woods, having adventures with my friends, using my creativity to solve a lot of problems, washing off the dark edges of the life that I lived with like creative games and imaginary stories that I created. That's where my love of fantasy, my love of world building came to be, because that was my survival tactic. I would dissociate and go into my mind and imagine another world to exist in. Another world with monsters and ghouls and demons and horrid creatures. And if you look at that period of time, I only drew monsters because that's how I perceived the world around me, full of monsters. But those monsters in my imagination were someone that I could defeat through strength, through cleverness, through creativity, and through my passion. And that's how I coped with reality. But again, every time I went into the clouds, as my teachers called it, they would grab my hair and shake me violently and grab a bunch of tufts of my locks with it. So I sacrificed my hair for a chance to exist in another world, and my saving grace was me trying to bring that world that exists in my head to other people. That's where I found my passion, my creativity, my way of channeling my inner struggle and of creating those worlds and bringing them into real world, like as stories, as adventures, as fairy tales, as comic books, and all those different stories. But as a child, where I try to share those ideas and share those stories, again, me foolishly sharing those stories with people who wouldn't appreciate it, with bullies, with older people who wouldn't understand, I got a lot of negative pushback and I abandoned a lot of those projects, and I still have a lot of blocks to actually write those stories, create those stories, because I've talked about many comic book ideas, many book ideas, many story and many different ideas I have, but putting them into reality is still a challenge, because I'm being sharing the most vulnerable part of myself, my mind space where I was safe from the outside world. I'm trying to share that part of my world, which is really difficult for me. But I really want to do it because it would give meaning to that struggle, and it would turn some ugly experience into something beautiful, I feel like. And hopefully these troubling times will come to a close, and I will have more opportunities to express my ideas. That's one of the reasons I created my channel. I wanted to create my channel again for 10 years, but again, that's why I've trauma dumped so much, because I wanted to share about why I couldn't start my channel when I had those ideas, because I was like going through a lot of negative experience, and it took me years and years to become comfortable to share those ideas. Because when I finally finished school, I went to university. I was forced to go to a wine university against, like, kicking and screaming, basically. Thankfully, what I really appreciate is that I finally found friends who I could relate. I really thought that I was the lone nerd who was interested in fantasy and those like sci-fi and fantasy and the movies and comic books. But going to university, I finally found people who shared my ideas, who were passionate in similar ways, who knew more in some other things, and I knew more about the other things, and we could be friends together, and not, I shouldn't have to hide or be ashamed of myself, me being a nerd, me being a goofy guy with silly ideas. And I finally found a world where I could express myself, and then in that world I finally found friends where we could start LARP, we could start D&D, and tabletop role-playing games, where finally I found my kin. I finally found people who I could talk to, people like beings of my own species. Yes, we are all humans, but not being able to communicate with other people was such a difficult part of my childhood. Not being able to find one person who I could share my thoughts with, who wouldn't scream at me, who wouldn't laugh at me. I remember once talking to one of those hood kids about werewolves. I was really passionate about werewolves as a child. And he literally had a panic attack and was screaming and calling me a demon. He's crazy. We were in a campsite. We were going to other people, other adults, but did you hear what he said? He's crazy. He's crazy. You need to stop him. He's crazy. I couldn't. I was just telling you about cool stories about werewolves that I like. And he went into a panic. He wasn't being a bully or look how crazy he is. He was genuinely terrified of me telling him about fairy tales about werewolves. Maybe he was a kid as well. He might have gotten scared. We were in the woods, but I don't know. That's the one in the last part. I shared my ideas with another person that resulted in them going into a state of shock. Finally, as an 18 and 19-year-old, I finally found people, my community, my friends, who I could be myself with without any shame, without any remorse. I always was myself, but over time I was better not to express too much of myself, too much of my ideas, because again, people literally might burn me on the stake. But I finally found those people, my kin, my species of nerds, and I finally started to open up. But when I started to open up, all the gathered trauma, all the torments and all the turmoil rushed out of me. And the fact as well that I was in a university studying a subject that I didn't care for, winemaking. I don't really like drinking wine, to be honest. I don't like alcohol at all. I was forced into it because my family owned some plot of land, and it's Georgian tradition, blah blah blah. My father just really wanted a professional winemaker to make him wine, Typical Georgian behavior. Second year of my uni, where we really went into the deep biology and chemistry, I had a panic attack in a class because let's try to actually learn about the biochemistry. And I couldn't care because at that time before I went to university, I started going into animation school because, jumping back a little bit, just jumping around too much. Again, as a teenager, I was really repressed. I was in myself. I existed in my own inside world. And then I tried to start working to create books, create stories, and create animation and comic books to bring my worlds to reality. So when I was 17, 18 years old, I tried making documentary and I tried making short movies. I made some of them with the Pioneer Films, but I didn't have the charisma and I didn't have social skills to gather friends. I didn't have friends to make some sketches, make some videos. That's when I was 16, 17. That's what I really wanted to make YouTube videos, make some, the sketch videos were really popular. This was basically 10, 11 years ago. I'm 27 now, I was 17 then. So I really wanted to make sketch comedies, little fake movie trailers, movie reviews, all those kind of things, but I couldn't get people to participate in it. Well, I didn't realize that I could do all of this alone with myself, but then I decided, I cannot gather people to act in my plays, act in my shows, make my own little movies. Okay, then what can I do as a one-person army? I could try to do comic books, I could try to do animation. Then I tried to study animation. There I made a lot of friends that I'm still friends with, and I'm really proud that I kept in touch with those people. And that's where I met my first friends after like 10 years of not having any friends. Then at 17 years old in those animation classes, I finally met some friends, and still friends with them today, and made more later on at 18, 19, and I'm really glad to finally have managed to find people of my own species that could understand. And hopefully, if you're watching, if you manage to watch my massive rambling videos, you're one of those kinds of people who maybe struggle to find someone with your mentality, but using internet you could have found other people like yourselves. Unfortunately, I really didn't like using social media at that time and refused to join any groups. I was like, I'm cool, I'm not one of those people who are addicted to social media. But now I really needed to create a larger following to make my content and have an audience, because one of the difficult things being creative on the internet is the silence, where you pour your heart and soul into it, and maybe 100 or couple of people, 1 or 2 likes, or usually even 0, no views, no likes, no attention. That's really soul crushing. But I tried to become an animator as a 17-year-old, and as 17, 18, I really tried to dedicate learning how to draw, learning how to animate, and doing the complicated university work about biology, chemistry, microbiology, the flora, fauna, entomology, all that stuff really became difficult. And I became split in my mind, because I worked all day for university, then I worked all night for my animation and drawing projects, and trying to teach myself how to draw, how to animate, how to make my own animation YouTube channel at that point. And I had a complete mental break, fell into a horrible depression. I fully haven't recovered from, but I'm not as in dire straits as I was maybe somewhere like 7 years ago, when I was like 20 to 21 years old. Then I took 1 year gap year from university. Finally, when my family saw how horribly tortured and how horrible this situation made me, then finally they managed to, okay, fine, you don't really have to be a winemaker. Fine, sure, as long as you don't die, we will budge a little bit. You still have to go to university. I ended up being in university for 8 fucking years. I really didn't want to go to university because I knew diploma wouldn't give me anything, and of course it didn't give me anything other than wasted time. Then I took a gap year. I tried to record some videos, make a lot of animations, make a lot of projects, but at the end of the day, I don't know, depression is a really difficult thing. You can get hyper work mode, that I can make everything and work, and then go into a depressive mode that you can't even move, you can't even breathe. I had to go to rage mode just to breathe and just to stand on my 2 legs. That's how horrible. Then I would go up and have a manic episode that I would like make 1,000 things at the same time, craft, draw, make this, and then go into manic episode. In that time period, we started LARP, we started a lot of D&D projects, and that was like the only therapeutic work I could get. I did went to a psychologist, but didn't really help at all that much. So when I would get like manic episode, like hyperactive manic episodes, I would go into the woods, and you see these trees, like I would fell those trees. Some of those trees I actually felled in my manic episodes, and like grab those trees and violent like a bear shake them. Of course, not healthy ones, the ones that are already dead and have no leaves and nothing, I would violently shake them and drop those trees, and then grab those trees and carry them around, and used to build huts out of them, like putting layers and layers of wood like this, like more and more layers, like up here or even higher, and would make woodland cabins, and I used those as my base in LARP games. It was trying to like channel my rage in my depressive state into something more productive, and it was really crazy. I would like thankfully I live close to the woods, and when I would get into manic episodes, I would just run into the woods and be like a crazy bear, felling down trees and building huts with those. And what else? During that LARP period is when I started crafting, because nobody knew how to make anything. Neither did I. I would make things out of duct tape and cardboard. It was really, really terrible, but there was no one to teach me anything. All the YouTube tutorials on how to make LARP stuff only works if you live in America and you have access to a lot of very unaffordable or unavailable material that doesn't exist anymore. So I had to learn everything through trial, error, and it took me years and years and years to understand the basics of crafting. But there was like, at the same time, I also trying to advance my drawing and animation skills, but I can spend each time, because then I went back into university. I went through graphic design, because that's the closest thing I could find to what I wanted to do, but I didn't really want to do graphic design. I wanted to make my own books and my comic books, fantasy lore books, and all of that stuff. But in that time period, I finally started to open up again, started making new friends, started hanging out with my other classmates, and started to bring about the happy university life. Everyone talks about where you have friends, you go to parties, you have fun with other people. Then boom, coronavirus hit and fucked everything over, and we all went through the horrible times of coronavirus, and I struggled a lot in those time periods as well, because I was locked in my house, had to return to the glued to the TV screen mentality or computer screen mentality that I tried and spent 5 years finally escaping from, and all the work on all the labor to become more social, more active, talking to people, making friends, all of them went into the garbage, and I became a hermit, internet hermit again. But university work continued in the school, so I had to attend classes, studio classes, where we had like communal workspaces where we drew together, we created together. Now it's like all of us are sitting in our rooms trying to work together, and I lost all the connection I built during that time with my friends. LARP wasn't possible anymore. Best thing I could do is Zoom D&D and other tabletop sessions. And that's where I basically, unfortunately, regressed mentally and physically back into the traumatized little teenager I was, where I was constantly at my TV screen alone without any friends. Then after coronavirus, it took a lot of work to again come out of my shell again. During coronavirus, people are, oh, we have so much free time, I don't know what to do. I had none of the free time, because university decided, you guys are all at home, so we're going to give you double the work and double the demands and double the time period. So like we would have Zoom classes from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock of night, like random time periods and random time intervals. All of the works that the university the benefited us was in the studio, and studio was closed. And I don't know, I used to go to university gym and regained all the fat I worked so hard to lose. And after coronavirus finally opened up, I couldn't really, the classes, all that, the communal classes were all over. Only couple of like finals project remained, And now, like years after, it's been like, I don't know, 2-3 years where officially coronavirus lockdown is over, and I'm trying to actually break through and become social again, and build the dream YouTube channel that I strive for, which the topic is about. And during the last few years of lockdown, I tried to make the risk it all and start my YouTube channel. After 2-3 years later, 3-4 years later, I finally managed to gather 20,000 subscribers. I'm really happy for all of you. I'm really glad that you watch my videos. I really appreciate you guys, and I promise to make bigger and better content. One thing, of course, to mention before I finish up is the current ongoing process, which again, just fighting with my inner demons is not enough. The demons must also run the world, and we must fight them as well. During last year, about this time period, there are massive protests beforehand, and I was part of all of them. But during last year, this period, the spring period, massive protests started against the government because they were taking up laws, more reminiscent to Russian-style laws about against foreign agents bill. And because I started my YouTube channel and finally gotten monetized last year during this period, I became technically a foreign agent. Because I got paid from YouTube, I'm technically a foreign agent. So people like me, people who got paid from outside of the country, were considered foreign agents. That was meant to destabilize the non-government organizations that were trying to uphold democratic standards. That was supposed to start the process of breaking all the links connecting us to the Western world, being Europe, being America, and slowly shifting us towards Russia, because Russia has started the war in 2022. That's actually when I started making my YouTube channel as well, and it was really traumatic because when I finally started making my videos, boom, Russian war started, and Russia was like, we are going to go first into Ukraine, then into Georgia. And I was like, okay, finally. When I started making my YouTube channel, Russia fucks me over again. But thankfully, Ukrainians fought Russians back hard, and many Georgian soldiers went over there and fought for Ukraine. I am ashamed because I really wanted to help as much as I can. I was actually thinking going there, but I haven't gone through my own country's military. I don't have any experience. I like to LARP as a warrior, but as a modern soldier, I have no useful skills other than like scoliosis and flat feet. But if I really regret not being able to like physically help, so I made a lot of videos about supporting Ukraine. But then Russia copyright struck those videos, and it's a complicated story. Georgian government decided to fully commit to Russian path, abandoning European accession to first again took the laws like foreign agents laws to break the local non-government and freedom organizations, and then started to completely distance themselves from European Union. And after that, during this process, I was trying to make my own videos, make my own content, and a lot of the plans and a lot of the videos and subjects I really wanted to make, I had to put them aside because of the protests. I filmed a lot of videos on protests, but then file corrupted and a lot of problems I had with this, and I couldn't regularly keep up my proper upload schedule that would generate wealth. After summer, when I made a couple of videos that some of them went further and blew up and had a lot of views, and I'm very thankful for you all to have watched it. Then came this autumn period where our government faked the elections, stole the elections, created a lot of strife, then decided to completely abandon our European path, And from that day on, I and many others, for more than 150 or something days, we've been continuously protesting, trying to fight and regain our European path, which is really difficult because as someone who wants to make videos, who also wants to draw, who also wants to craft, to be creative and artist, to share my ideas to the world, share my ideas to you, dear viewer, but also feel responsible for the fate of my country, for the fate of the world, because what's happening in my country also is happening all over the world. Similar dictatorial and fascistic governments are rising all over the world, and all of them, you need to know, be it like Donald Trump, be it the Georgian Dream Party, be it anyone else, all of them are financed by Russia. Russia is putting all of its card into destabilizing Western and the European global unity as a strong unified force to destabilize both Europe from inside, America, to destroy like American hegemony and plunge the world into chaos of local warlords trying to keep their power struggle, which is horrible for us, for Georgians, for Ukrainians and everyone who is considered under Russian sphere of influence. Such a horrible idea, just because your neighbor is a bully, so you must have to suck up to them. That's like this political realism, such a horrible ideology that's like, oh, this is how everything is meant to be. Big powers decide the fate of little powers. This is just imperialism reflavored. Oh no, this is like realpolitik. This is how everything is supposed to be. No. Everything is not supposed to be like that. Everything is built like European Union is built on smaller countries uniting together to become a stronger force. America was prided for actually standing up for freedom once upon a time. American neighbors, I don't know, Cuba can decide to be communist and have allies with West. Like this is like, do you want American neighbors to be pro-Russian if you let pro-Russian neighbors to be pro-Western? Yes, any country should decide their own fate. And if you're a neighbor and if you want to have a strong relationship with your neighbor, you shouldn't bully them. You should offer them friendly relationships. Like America did before, not now. Like, what the fuck is America doing? Everything, the world America has built, they're destroying it themselves. For what? Again, for the interests of oligarchs of Russia, because Russian oligarchs and American oligarchs are working together to create a neo-feudalistic state of fascist dictatorship where a few people control everything and everyone else is just a subject. And using the weaknesses of democracy, of failures, of stupidity, and easily manipulated people to do it all. It is so sad, it is so tragic, and I feel so much responsibility to fight for it. But I don't know, man. I can't be both fun, creative, let's talk about the elves and dwarves and orcs, and also talk about the realpolitik and the rising fascism. Yes, I believe that art can be, and art and fantasy especially, can be a very great tool to talk about these topics. Really great like vessel to tackle the ideas that maybe you cannot tackle directly, but making it colorful, making it like reflavoring, coloring, like replacing humans with dwarves, elves and orcs and such and so forth. You could talk about much more complicated ideals that you couldn't talk about with like humans and real world stories. You could go deeper into the ideas, like see where it might lead. But unfortunately, in this state of being, it's really difficult to both talk about escapism and tackle the subject of reality that is at hand. But I feel and I believe it is our responsibility of creative people, be it writers, artists, musicians, YouTubers, whoever it is our responsibility to fight for those ideals that have been washed away from the reality because, it's not realistic, it's not really gritty and dark, and realism means there is no hope, realism means that everyone is evil, realism means that nobody has any hope and nobody does anything to be good and to be decent. But no, real people struggle for real ideals. Reality has heroes. Reality has people who sacrifice their lives for the others to be better. There are people who would die for their dream. There are people who would live a struggle in life for a fairy tale. There are people who would sacrifice themselves so others could theoretically be happy. And they would never see that happiness brought forth, but they would still sacrifice themselves for truth, for justice, for freedom, for love, for not just romantic love, for love for your neighbor, for love for humanity, for love for animals, for love for nature. Those things are real because we make it real. Nothing is real other than what we make of it. Like saying that, oh, everything is cruel, humans are dark. Yes, there are dark, but there are also good who struggle against it. That is one of the biggest reasons I believe fascism, I believe nihilism and the depression and like lack of humanity is rising, is because we do not tell stories of true heroes. We do not tackle difficult subjects. We either pretend like heroes are those like people with godlike powers, and if you do not have laser eye vision, you cannot be a hero and you cannot fight for what is right, or that there is no one who is truly good and no one who truly fights for what is right, and everyone are selfish, dark people manipulating the world for their twisted ambitions. No, there is good, there is righteousness, and we must fight for it. Yes, there is darkness, but also there is good, and good is responsible to fight that darkness. Darkness wins when there is no good to stand up to it. So I don't know, I really want to make sure to make more content, especially weekly basis, to appease the great algorithm, but also to make type of content that more and more people would watch, but also to appease the responsibility I feel for my country and for the world. So I need to somehow balance it, find new ways to make videos. I have a lot of ideas before I even started making YouTube videos. One of the biggest topics I've been teasing over years now is making fantasy anthropology, because I really love, again, biology was my favorite subject and anthropology was my favorite subject, how things evolve, especially how humans evolve, how cultures develop, and taking that idea and putting those like elves, dwarves and orcs and ogres and all such in that frame of reference, and talking more about mythology, fantasy, history. I have so many ideas to share. I have so many thoughts to talk to you about, and more importantly, I have so many stories to create and share and I don't know, bring joy upon the world, and especially the stories. My biggest goal is to, like, I don't know, be meaningful, not just entertaining, not just pure the wasting of time, but also something that can be appreciated, like be it Tolkien or my favorite writer, Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett is such a goat. Reading his book, written in the 90s and the early 2000s and maybe even 80s, he tackled those fantastical topics and tackled modern topics with the fantastical characters in such a unique way, in such a beautiful way, that I wish I could like capture 10% of it. 10% of the brilliance, but give my own flavor, give my own twist, not be like a pale imitation of another great artist, but my own version, bring my own Georgian ideas and ideals and my own michra mochras and crazy ideas into this. And also one of the biggest joys and plans and goals and missions is to introduce the beautiful world that we live in. I don't spend a lot of time making videos about historical figures and political intrigue that went out in our history, because there are actually other YouTubers who do a pretty good job. Shout out to Stoic Historian. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I watch his videos. He talks about Georgian and Armenian and Caucasian and just overall history a lot, and I'm like, he does such a great job. Should I even tackle this subject? I'm going to tackle this subject in more like story-wise, to not just tell you about the history of the country, but the idea it represents. That's why I go deep into mythology, and that's the well I dig. That's the mine I dig down in, Georgian mythology and Caucasian mythology, because it is the missing link in the global mythical narrative, and tells a lot of secrets and a lot of ideas, and many things are still unknown, and many things I still haven't got to and read to and analyzed. But that is the world, and that is the whole. I thought I would like cover like 1 or 2 stories that talk about Amirani, talk about Medea and Colchis and stuff like that, and move on and then talk about history. But it trying to learn a few things about it, it became such a huge well that I cannot dig myself out of. I don't know, many crazy ideas, many crazy stories, and hopefully through our struggle and through our creativity we can find a light through these dark tunnels, and we can use this experience to better ourselves and raise a new generation with better ideas and ideals. I don't know, I know I've rambled far too long. If you managed to listen through all of this, I'm deeply grateful. You're one of the greatest of the greats, and I'm genuinely thankful for all of you, each and every one of you, for listening to my mad ramblings, because that has been my dream, to have an audience, to have someone to talk to. As a kid with my crazy ideas, watching Dexter's Laboratory, or I don't know, Jimmy Neutron, be like, I'm going to build this, I'm going to invent that. Everyone's like looking at me as a sick madman, and finally having a space, an audience to talk and ramble to is really appreciated. And I thank all of my friends who I met along this difficult journey, and thanks to all the friends I will make in the future, including all of you, my dear viewers. And of course, great thank you to my Patreon supporters. Have been really the lifeblood, because I cannot tell you how many life-saving moments came from the Patreon supporters. I greatly appreciate every cent and every dollar you give. It is truly the lifeblood. I don't have any other stable income, and it's been days where only thing I have to rely is the Patreon support, because YouTube also the copyright struck my previous elf video because I used few seconds of Lord of the Rings, and it's really annoying. But again, great thank you. You are the true heroes that helped me fight my battles, and without you nothing could have been accomplished, and with you greater and greater things will be accomplished. I promise you that. Alright, birds. My ass. Why did that? Why? Wow. I did that.